The House Oversight Subcommittee on Public Health and Food Security will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Beerline.
Here.
Representatives Paquette.
Here.
Green.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
Cerniglu.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Representative Green moves to approve the minutes of the April 22nd meeting. Hearing no objection, they are approved. Today we have a presentation from the Office of the Auditor General and their report on the Michigan Liquor Control Commission's IT systems. This report was published in March of 2024 and raised serious concerns about accountability, oversight, and the integrity of state operations involving the sale and distribution of liquor. What you will hear today among the report's most concerning findings is that tens of thousands of bottles of state-owned liquor worth hundreds of thousands of dollars were found missing from distribution warehouses with little to no documentation to explain their whereabouts. The Michigan Liquor Control Commission failed to conduct annual physical inventories at authorized distribution agencies between 2019 and 2022 and lacked sufficient systems to monitor real-time inventory and ordering data. And that numerous licenses were issued in violation of the state law, including in dry jurisdictions and cities that already exceeded their legal quota for on-premise licenses. I would like to note that the Auditor General's report does not allege criminal wrongdoing, but the depth of the deficiencies, especially in system oversight and record keeping, demands close attention from this committee. I appreciate the Auditor General's office and their thorough work on this report and look forward to their presentation today, as well as the opportunity to ask questions and understand how these issues will be addressed moving forward. Although Michigan Liquor Control Commission was not able to join us today, we are hoping to have them appear before this committee in the near future to report back on how they responded to the findings and recommendations outlined in this audit. With that, I'd like to welcome from the Office of the Auditor General, Becky Murray, Principal Audit Supervisor, and Natalie Heckman, Senior Audit Supervisor, to come and present whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Beerline and committee members for inviting us here to present the report on the Michigan Liquor Control Commission selected operational processes and IT systems. Sorry. I am Becky Murray, an audit supervisor with the Office of the Auditor General, and with me is Natalie Heckman, also an audit supervisor. I will provide a brief overview of the audit and MLCC's spirit ordering process, findings 1 and 2, and then Natalie will walk you through finding 3 and the observation. The Michigan Liquor Control Commission, or MLCC, is the sole wholesaler of all spirit products in the state of Michigan. The commission is responsible for licensing the manufacture, distribution, and sale of all beer, wine, distilled spirits, and mixed spirits drink in the state. MLCC, in conjunction with the Department of Technology, Management, and Budget, or DTMB, uses several IT systems to license manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers and manage online spirit orders and product distribution. MLCC contracts with 3 authorized distribution agents, or ADAs, who warehouse and distribute spirit products in Michigan on behalf of the state. Revenues generated through that process totaled $1.6 billion in fiscal year 2023. Our audit focused on MLCC's efforts to comply with state laws, regulations, and policies for the sale and distribution of spirit products, interface controls over selected liquor systems, and security and user access controls over selected liquor systems. Our audit generally covered processing in place between October of 2020 and August of 2022. The scope of the audit included spirit products and did not include beer, wine, or mixed spirits. We identified 3 material findings, 4 reportable conditions, and 1 observation. MLCC and DTMB agreed with all findings. Our first objective begins on page 9. The objective was to assess the sufficiency of MLCC's efforts to comply with selected state laws, regulations, and policies for the sale and distribution of spirit products. We determined MLCC's efforts were not sufficient. Before discussing the findings noted in Objective 1, we would like to walk through the exhibit on page 41, which describes MLCC's spirit purchase, sale, and inventory process as of the time of our audit. The process begins when retailers submit orders for spirit products either through the state's online ordering system or directly to the ADAs. The ADAs process all spirit orders to create the daily gross order file, which details the quantity of each spirit product to be delivered each day. The ADAs send this file to MLCC daily. ADAs then deliver the spirit product to the retailer, which can occur immediately after the ADAs compile the spirit orders. MLCC uses the daily gross order file and state-owned spirit inventory balances to calculate the quantity of each spirit product it needs to purchase from the vendors. MLCC creates the daily purchase order file, which is sent to the vendors of spirit to effectively purchase the cases needed to fulfill the orders. The state and the ADAs then update their state-owned inventory records to reflect any purchases. MLCC sends the payment to the vendors on a weekly basis. As the ADAs deliver spirits to the retailers, they create and send MLCC the daily invoice files, showing the quantity of each spirit product delivered and accepted by each retailer. MLCC uses the daily invoice files from the ADAs to calculate and record sales to the retailers and adjust state-owned spirit inventory balances for these sales. Additional files are provided by the ADAs to recap invoice files and detail the amounts owed to the state from the retailers. With that high-level overview of the overall spirit distribution process, we will now discuss the material findings noted in Objective 1. Finding 1 begins on page 10 of the report. It states MLCC did not provide adequate oversight of ADAs to ensure all state-owned spirits received and distributed by the ADAs were reflected within the state's purchase and sale records, nor did state inventory balances accurately reflect spirit products on hand at ADA warehouses. Part A states MLCC did not perform reconciliations of inventory purchased from vendors to ensure the quantity of spirits MLCC purchased each day was reasonable. Based on the quantity of spirits ADAs asserted were ordered and delivered to retailers. Also, MLCC did not reconcile system retail orders with deliveries to ensure that MLCC sales were reasonable based on the quantities delivered to retailers. Part B states MLCC did not have a process to track and monitor spirit orders retailers place directly with the ADAs because ADAs provide final documentation to MLCC after delivery. From February 2021 until August of 2022, $1.1 billion in spirit orders were submitted directly to the ADAs and not placed in the state's online ordering system. With orders made directly to ADAs, MLCC should have a mechanism in place, whether through the system or another method, to be notified of the retailer's orders. Additionally, MLCC did not prohibit ADAs from delivering spirit products to retailers prior to MLCC taking ownership of the product. This could result in MLCC recording a sale before the inventory is owned, causing a negative inventory balance. Part C on page 11 states MLCC cannot conduct an accurate, timely physical inventory because even though the inventory adjustments are made weekly, a 2 to 3 week delay exists in MLCC's process. Also, state and vendor-owned spirit products are commingled in the physical inventory counts. For example, MLCC's procedure is to count the entire inventory for a specified product in the ADA warehouse. If MLCC's inventory records indicate it owns 50 bottles and MLCC counts 300 bottles, MLCC takes the position that the first 50 bottles belong to the state. MLC's process assumes the vendor would agree that they own 250 bottles, equaling the total of 300 bottles physically present in the warehouse. If the vendor believes they own 275 bottles, it would be up to the ADA to work with the vendor to determine the cause of the 25 bottle discrepancy. On page 12, we note the current legislation does not clearly define the ADA's responsibilities, but it does define MLCC's duty and statutory authority to exercise complete control over alcoholic beverage traffic within the state. Finding 2 begins on page 14. MLCC did not have sufficient controls to monitor and manage spirit inventory, resulting in excessive and negative spirit inventory balances. MLCC's process to purchase and resell spirits is on an as-needed basis based on the daily orders from retailers. Therefore, MLCC's inventory on hand should generally be minimal. Our analysis covered inventory balances between October of 2020 and July of 2022. Part A on page 15 states MLCC did not always purchase spirit inventory prior to recording sales to retailers, resulting in negative inventory balances. Our review noted that total negative spirit inventory on any given week ranged from approximately 9,000 bottles negative to negative 900,000 bottles, valued at approximately $115,000 and $6.6 million respectively for all spirit inventory between October of 2020 and July of 2022. Generally, a negative inventory balance occurs when the ADA delivers the spirit product to the retailer, but does not include the product delivered in the order documentation that is submitted to MLCC. Or MLCC's system inaccurately calculates purchases, and therefore MLCC does not purchase the spirit. Part B on page 15 and continued on page 16 states MLCC did not effectively monitor inventory balances, resulting in excessive accumulated inventory balances for various spirit products for an extended period of time. Exhibits 2 through 4 on pages 42 through 47 depict the examples noted in Part B. On page 17, MLCC informed us excessive spirit inventory balances could occur if the ADAs did not submit all daily invoice files to MLCC and MLCC does not record the sale, or MLCC's system does not accurately account for the inventory on hand when calculating the inventory purchases, or the documentation ADAs provide contain errors in the quantity of spirit product ordered or delivered, resulting in MLCC purchasing or reselling an inaccurate amount of inventory. Or lastly, the ADAs submit the daily order files and ship the spirit product to the retailer, and MLCC appropriately purchases the product for resale. Later, the ADAs report spirit products were broken, returned, or refused during delivery, and as a result, MLCC purchased more product than was needed, which adds to the accumulation of inventory through the normal course of business. And now Natalie will walk you through finding 3 and the observation.
Finding number 3 begins on page 20. It states MLCC did not effectively manage state-owned spirit inventory housed at ADA warehouses. As a result, MLCC potentially received refunds from vendors for state-owned inventory which may have already been distributed to retailers. We reviewed MLCC's physical inventory count procedures, analyzed state-owned inventory balances, and conducted a physical inventory at one ADA's warehouses. Part A on page 20 states MLCC did not conduct physical inventory counts of state-owned spirits in any of the ADA's warehouses between October of 2019 and July of 2022. Part B on page 20 and continued on page 21 states MLCC did not have adequate controls to ensure physical inventory counts matched the state's inventory records. Specifically, MLCC identified a significant portion of state-owned spirit inventory missing from ADA warehouses between January and February 2022. In lieu of doing a physical inventory count, MLCC asked the ADAs to review the state-owned spirit inventory and confirm what inventory was not in their warehouses. As noted in the table on page 20, and according to MLCC records, state-owned inventory recorded for the 3 ADAs totaled approximately 521,000 bottles with a value of $4.9 million. However, upon the ADA's recount, approximately 62,300 bottles were missing, totaling approximately $1 million. As noted in the process description provided earlier, MLCC purchases spirit inventory only when daily gross order files are received from the ADA detailing spirits out for delivery. MLCC records a sale when the daily invoice files are received from the ADA detailing spirits delivered to the retailers. It is possible MLCC does not receive all daily invoice files recording sales to retailers, and MLCC is processing refunds from the vendor for inventory which was distributed to a retailer when inventory is identified as missing from the ADA warehouses. In addition, we sampled 65 of the 4,999 spirit products and performed a physical inventory of the ADA warehouses. Our inventory count identifies 7 of the 65 spirit products were either missing or had insufficient inventories during our site visits in August of 2022. Next, we will discuss the observation on the impacts of liquor license quotas beginning on page 27. An observation generally does not have all the elements required by auditing standards to be reported as a finding. However, it provides commentary on certain details or events that may be of interest to the legislature or other users of the report. The observation states that MLCC uses license quotas to identify the maximum number of certain retail liquor license types which can be issued within a local governmental unit or an LGU. However, Michigan law allows for other situations to occur in which license availability within an LGU can be negative, thereby preventing businesses from obtaining a new license unless specific circumstances apply. State laws define quota limits for the number of certain on-premises and specially designated distributor, or SDD licenses, based on each LGU's population. On-premises and SDD licenses are retail liquor licenses that allow for the sale of spirits to consumers. State law also allows MLCC to issue SDD licenses exceeding the quota if there is no existing SDD licensee within 2 miles of the applicant. Also, state law sections define rules for transferring licenses between LGUs when the license is in escrow status. Once transferred, these licenses will count against the quota of the LGU which originally issued the license, even if the licensee operates in a different LGU. When the population in an LGU increases or decreases, the LGU quota is then increased or decreased respectively. MLCC cannot revoke issued licenses when a quota decreases, which could then result in negative licenses available. As noted in the table on page 27, where the population decreased from 2010 to 2020 in a specific LGU, the quotas for each license type also decreased. We reviewed select licenses within a sample of LGUs and determined the licenses reviewed were issued in accordance with the quota laws at the time of issuance. We also analyzed all LGUs with on-premises or SDD licenses as of June 13th, 2022, to determine the total number of LGUs with negative license availabilities, and the LGUs with the highest number of negative available licenses. For instance, as noted in our table on page 28, Detroit's on-premises and SDD licenses have the largest negative availability. This is due to population declines over time, which then changes the number of licenses allowed, and allowances in the law to issue SDD licenses over the quota limit. When the number of available licenses is negative, new retail license applicants will not be granted a license unless one of the following occurs. A current licensee relinquishes their license to MLCC and the license availability becomes positive, or the 2-mile condition is met, which applies to SDD licenses only, or an existing licensee sells their license to an applicant approved by MLCC, resulting in a transfer. When a license is transferred, the applicant may have substantially higher costs than purchasing the license directly from MLCC. As noted in the chart on page 29, an applicant will pay up to $1,070 to obtain a license from MLCC. However, when purchasing a license from private sale or transfer, the costs can range from $50,000 to $350,000 or more, because existing licenses may be legally purchased and transferred to a business. While license transfers must be approved by MLCC, the terms of the sale are not regulated. Michigan law currently allows for situations in which license availability can be negative in an LGU as a result of population decreases or allowable quota exemptions, such as the 2-mile condition. And businesses desiring to obtain a license must choose one of the following options. They must wait for a license to become available from the state or pay other businesses willing to sell and transfer their existing license. Without significant effort, MLCC may not be able to accurately determine the originating LGU of a transferred license due to the number of times a license might be transferred over an extended period of time, and therefore cannot ensure the accuracy of licenses issued against an LGU's quota. The impacts of liquor license quotas could be further evaluated to determine if the current processes and controls over license management should be reassessed or if amendments to the current law are appropriate. Page 30 of the observation includes several topics for consideration, including but not limited to, should population be used to define the quotas? Are there alternative methods for calculating quotas? And should licensing price and availability be further analyzed? Upon completion of the audit, corrective action plans were provided by MLCC and DTMB, which detail plans to implement the sales, inventory, and purchasing system, also known as SIPS Plus, to replace legacy systems and provide key process enhancements. As of April 1st of 2025, information available from the DTMB Enterprise Portfolio Management Office indicates that SIPS Plus is not yet operational. So thank you for your time and your consideration. We will now address any questions that you may have related to the audit.
Thank you, for taking the time to come in today. I know that you presented this information last year in committee. We wanted to address with MLCC when they come. We had to reschedule and they weren't able to make it today, so they are committed to coming and answering questions, but we know that they haven't actually implemented the systems that they said they were going to fix the problems that they had. So we wanted you to come in, give us all an overview, refresher course on what you presented last year. We'll start with Representative Green for questions.
I'm going to say that 62,000 bottles of missing liquor was not on my bingo card today. Thank you for your exhaustive report. Thank you for coming into a lot of work lately with Oversight. I guess so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we're missing over 62,000 bottles of liquor. There's 1.1 billion in off-the-book orders, okay, from how I interpreted that. And there was no physical audits for 2 years. And then they're changing now, like Representative Beerline, just for clarity, because it's hard to wrap your mind about. So then they were trying to change the system to improve it, but they have yet to implement what they were trying to change. Okay, so do we know where those missing bottles of alcohol are? Or are they just, these might be an MLCC question and not necessarily your guys' question. And you can say that since, yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know that we know. In looking at it, as noted in the report, there was not documentation to clearly show that. It could be a documentation issue, it could be a missing liquor issue, but the agency would probably be better equipped to answer that question.
Okay, just another follow-up that. So how were 1.1 billion in liquor orders made outside of the tracking system? How is that possible?
So as we have detailed in the exhibit, what the process allows is for the retailers to place their orders directly with the ADA, and then the ADA then informs MLCC of those orders after the fact. So again, not necessarily off the books, but just that MLCC is informed later of those orders from the ADAs. It does not go through the state system.
And then just a final question. Do you think there's more stringent regulations on the people who sell the alcohol than actually the state who operates it? Like, it seems like you can get in a lot of trouble as a business owner, but then the state has zero accountability.
I think the laws on that, like, there are definitely regulations on the retailers selling. The state does have laws as far as how they're supposed to be managing. And again, MLCC can probably tell you a little bit more about the laws over them specific. But yeah, there are laws on both sides regulating that.
Thank you.
Can you speak to the process a little bit? That's most of what you were auditing was the process, which then found out the lack of inventory or negative sales, those kinds of issues. So maybe a slower, more in-depth walkthrough of the process of how the sale takes place. I've got I have the graphic pulled up. So a retailer wants to bring in, 10 bottles of a certain type of alcohol into their store, and they can place an order with either directly with the state through the state's website, or they can call their distributor and say, no, I don't want to wait for the state to process this order. Can you get it? Can you kind of slowly walk through that process, have a better understanding?
Sure. So like you said, it begins with the retail licensee, and they'll either submit their order through the state's online ordering system, Milo, or directly to the ADA. And as noted in the report, often those orders that are going directly to the ADA are the large retailers. So think like your Meijers, your Costco, to allow for the ease of those retailers to place those large orders. And also emergency orders are allowed in the law to be placed directly with the distributors as well.
So an emergency order could be it's Friday and we had more sales than we thought we were going to, and I need inventory for Saturday. That would be an emergency order. But so you're saying our largest retailers, though, are like skipping over the process of ordering through the state because it's easier to order directly with the distributor, even though the state is the seller?
Our understanding is there's limitations, difficulties in using the state's online ordering system to place those large orders. So at this time, it was allowed that they could be placing their orders with the distributor.
Surprise. Okay, so they place the order either with the state or with the distributor directly, and then that product is delivered to the store, and at that point, the ADA sends an invoice to the state saying we delivered these products to a retailer. Is that the next step?
Correct, yeah.
The state runs a report and says that they sold X number of bottles that they've never actually inventoried or touched. After that point, is that how that works?
Are you referring to like the daily gross order file point? Because at that point, that's a file generated by the ADA
Okay.
telling the state, these are all the spirit products that have been ordered for the day.
Okay. So all of the products are ordered. They set up a distribution plan for whatever that is, whether it's later this week on a normal route or if it's an emergency order. And at that point, the state takes possession. Is that when this happens?
Sure, and then further down in the flow, so what MLCC then does is they process that daily gross order file. So what that processing entails is MLCC doing the math to determine how much they need to purchase. And at that point, the daily purchase order file is generated by MLCC. And in the creation of that daily purchase order file, that is when the state then sends out the payment and pays the vendors and purchases the product.
Okay, so if they're never, so the order is generated whether those bottles are delivered or not. Is that correct? Like that's the next step. That order is generated with MLCC to pay the vendors, but the vendors, maybe they've delivered already, maybe they haven't. But so just speaking, bluntly, if I order 50 bottles of Blanton's, they don't exist in the system, I'm not going to get them, but I could still order them. The MLCC charges the vendor for them or pays the vendor for however that works. But then when they go to deliver, they say, actually, we only had one bottle. And so then there's a refund. There's a lot there.
So our understanding was if the ADA does not physically have the product, they would not accept the order, whether that be through the state system or placing it directly with the distributor. So the product should be present in the ADA's warehouse for the order to then be accepted.
Is that accurately happening?
Based on our review of the communications that the state system has to the ADA system, our testing, we did obtain evidence of that communication occurring.
So then how was there a point where there were refunds being issued if they were able to not accept orders if they didn't have material or product?
Yeah, I think that's going back to what Becky had said, that there's just a lack of documentation overall to really pin down exactly how and why that occurred.
Okay. Any other questions at this time?
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Representative Paquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking through some of the recommendations, like finding 3, for instance, it says, and a lot of them are like this. Like, we recommend that MLCC effectively manage state-owned spirit inventory housed at ADA warehouses. Like, isn't that their job? Like, you're recommending them to just do their job? Is that kind of what I'm sensing here?
So our recommendations will typically speak to the weaknesses and controls and basically recommend that they improve those controls. And so in that case, we had, at the beginning of the finding, noted that they did not effectively manage the state spirit inventory based on those items noted in the finding. So we're recommending that they implement controls to manage that better. So yes.
Thank you so much.
So it was noted that they have not yet implemented their new system that was supposed to be implemented by the end of last year. I think their website now says end of this year. November of 25 is when they expect to roll, MLCC expects to roll that new system out. In the meantime, so there were obvious deficiencies previously. That same system is still being utilized, so I can't imagine those deficiencies have been corrected. How do we know if we're not just repeating this problem this year again? And that might not be a fair question for you. I'm sorry.
I think we would defer to the agency on that one.
Representative Green.
And just a follow up to that, because now isn't it going to be the state police that manages this instead of an investigator? Did I understand that with the new system?
That I don't know that we're aware how that will be managed. Again, that's probably a good question for MLCC.
And I guess just to Mr. Chair, because like, will the state police, if they're so armed officers, be any different than regular investigators? I guess would be a question we probably want to ask MLCC. And how does that actually fix the true internal issues going on by just transferring it over? Because isn't that what it is? Please, and maybe you, okay.
I don't think I have an answer for you either.
Just they moved it. It wasn't an executive order by the governor moving this whole system over then to the police and to the attorney general? I don't know. Nobody's here to answer that question, but okay. We'll get it there. Thanks.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I really don't want to ask a question because I'm so confused, but trying to understand. Can you tell me, is it this, maybe what percentage of sales are going through the ADA versus Milo? To try to understand.
So on,
And is basically the ADA orders, is that where things are going awry? Am I understanding? Like, if things were being all ordered through Milo, would then it be a lot clearer because we're just talking about one system?
I think the thing that we noted in the report, on page 11, in that second paragraph there, it talks about the 1.1 billion that was going through, or that the orders that were being made directly with the ADAs. That totaled approximately 35% of the orders
35%.
between February of 2021 and August of 2022.
Thank you.
And I think the reason that we pointed that out wasn't necessarily to say that those are going awry, but just to say that without knowing what was being ordered, it's difficult for MLCC to reconcile what was ordered with what was
Okay.
sold and get that clear reconciliation and clear record keeping.
Okay, and is there a certain group, and I think you may have said this, but I'm really kind of dazzled by all the detail. Who is it who generally orders through ADA? Is it different people every time, or is it there kind of a deal somewhere where larger retailers, and you may have already said it, but I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Yes, it's typically the larger retailers.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Representative Paquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of going back to finding one. It looks like, the recommendation, I go to the Commission's division overview and, Michigan.gov, the website here, and the Financial Management Division, it describes that The division is responsible for overseeing ADA operations and processing, balancing, and reconciling the liquor sales and inventory information submitted by the ADAs. And, the recommendation is like almost you copy and pasted that here in the recommendation. Is like, yeah, do that. That's our recommendation. And I just find that to be quite comical when I've got guys back home who are trying to get liquor licenses and they're just getting strung through the mud all day with these guys. And so here we are, and we're just copy and pasting a recommendation that's on their website of what they should already be doing. I just find that pretty comical, Mr. Chair. Just a comment.
Thank you, Representative. I'm going to shift gears just slightly to talk about the licensing piece of it and the transfer of licenses. So if I understand it correctly, we'll take Iron Mountain, because no one here represents Iron Mountain. We won't talk about anybody's community. They apparently had a higher population at one point. They have 14... they have a negative balance of 14 licenses that should be available, but they still have all 19 because as population has decreased, people had that license and then they sold it to somebody else. You mentioned that there's no tracking of where a license originated from. So does that mean that like someone from Iron Mountain could have bought a license from somebody completely not in that community and brought it in? And how does that work?
Sure. To clarify, MLCC does track where the licenses originate from and when they're transferred. What we have noted in the observation is that without significant effort, they might have difficulties getting back to that originating LGU of where the license came from, because you could go back to when these were paper records back in the 90s. So,
And then if they know where they've originated from and where they're going, even if it's paid for privately, how does a license get sold and then implemented in a dry community? Because I noticed that was also something that occurred.
sure, so that would be the items noted in finding number 4, and that again speaks to improvements that are available in MLCC's process to issue licenses. So, I'm sorry, finding 5, thank you.
Okay.
So again, suggestions for MLCC to improve their controls in that area as well.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming. It was, again, kind of a refresher for all of us of how this process works. It's not real cut and dry, and I think there's probably more questions than answers for most people today, but that's not on you. We definitely appreciate you coming, giving your presentation. Thank you, and we'll look forward to scheduling MLCC in the future. Again, they committed to coming, and because of some of our scheduling changes, they were not able to be here today. So with that, and having their, you're definitely excused. Thank you. Having there be no other business before the committee and no objections, committee is adjourned.